So this video is on caregiving. It's supposed to be hints, tips, and just some useful information from people who have been there and done that and experienced what it's like to be a caregiver, and the most valuable pieces of information that they could provide to somebody else who might be going through their journey. Caregiving is a unique journey. There's no way around it. The things that you're going to deal with are going to be unique. What would give me the audacity to put together a video on how to be a caregiver and make the most of that journey? I come from a long line of caregivers. It starts with my grandfather. My Uncle Chris, my dad's younger brother, was born with an intellectual disability. At that time, the prevailing ideology was that you take someone like that and you institutionalize them. My grandfather couldn't stomach that. So my grandfather felt like he had a better life than being institutionalized in mind for his son. He fought schools. He had no resources. Like the resources that we have today did not exist for my grandfather. So he was constantly fighting this uphill battle to try and prepare my uncle for some sort of functional life that was really not something that anybody would have expected for him. But my grandfather did so in a remarkable fashion. My Uncle Chris is one of the most fantastic people I've ever met. He loves the Special Olympics. He has a literal wall, like bigger than the wall behind me, filled with all of the medals that he has won over many, many years from participation in Special Olympics program. He worked at the VA hospital for like 30 years. My grandfather helped him get this job as a dishwasher at the VA hospital. My Uncle Chris never missed a day of work, ever. And when he retired, he had full benefits for an addition and 2 years worth of pay that he had built up in all of that time. My Uncle Chris owns his own home, and he rents out a room to his best friend. My Uncle Chris is an example of what can be done for people when you are determined to help them have the best life that they can have. My Uncle Chris has a fantastic life, and he is a fantastic person, and he is a shining light in this world. That's where it started in my family. Now, as my grandfather grew older, he suffered from dementia, and my mom and my dad took care of him as he progressed through that disease. After my grandfather passed away, my mom and my dad took in another family friend who was suffering from the same situation and did not want to end up in a care facility. So for several years, they took care of her until she passed away a few years ago. My older brother has a wonderful 16-year-old daughter with Down syndrome. My older sister has 2 boys with fairly low functioning autism. I have a son that had suffered a brain injury at birth and presents in a lot of ways like a person with low functioning autism, but he also has some medical issues as well. In addition to that, we have run into other people who are caregivers for people with various issues. We become friends, you become attached. It's very easy in this kind of special needs community that we have to become connected to each other, and with our therapists and everybody that we have engaged with, we've learned quite a bit. This video is an attempt to take that accumulated knowledge and find the most useful pieces and present them for anybody that's willing to listen. This is what gives me the audacity to make a video like this. With that being said, I'd like to start with a little discussion about mindset. When you have to, or get to, or choose to, or whatever, however this comes into your life being a caregiver, your mindset is going to be absolutely critical to the success that you have and the success of the person that you're caring for. There is a lady named Carol Dweck. She is a professor of psychology. I believe right now she is at Stanford. Don't quote me on that. But she wrote a book several years ago called Growth Mindsets: The New Psychology of Success. This book is absolutely fantastic, because what she did was she went in and she started to research what allowed school children to be the most successful. She was tracking these kids from very small up through adulthood And what she ended up finding out was that the mindset that these kids had the most impact on their success. And the key was for them to be focused on growth. So like the acquisition of a new useful skill. The idea of like having a test and getting a grade wasn't very helpful, but it was trying to go from knowing 5 of the vocabulary words to knowing 6, and then 7, and then 8. And if you focus too much on like the grade at the end of the test as your measuring stick for what gives someone value, it brings in things like a desire to cheat, and it kind of twists your focus on what's really, really important. And really, really what's most valuable is to go from where you are to where you could be, and to just get one step closer on that. And the people that focused on that had that kind of mindset were the ones that ended up being the most successful, because they were able to sustain that growth. They had to accept that it was kind of a journey. And that same mindset is something that I feel like is really, really valuable in caregiving. And I was very challenged at the beginning of my own personal caregiving journey, because I had what they call a fixed mindset, where I was focused on that grade at the end. And what I had to do was adapt the way that I looked at things and start thinking of things in a much more fluid, much more dynamic, much more directional mindset, where it's a journey. I'm not trying to get from here to there and then it's over. I just want to get one step further that way. I want to know what's the next step I need to take. What's the step after that? And I want to go that direction. And I don't exactly know where this is going to take me, but I want to go that direction. And maintaining that growth mindset for me has been absolutely critical to being able to appreciate the experiences that I have as a caregiver. So without getting too philosophical and crazy deep here, I need to talk about something right away, because this is the kind of experience, caregiving is the kind of experience that is going to push your consciousness. And best way to describe this is there's basically 4 states of consciousness. The first one is, they call it knowing that you know. You know something and you know that you know it. And it empowers you to be able to take that knowledge and utilize it and work with it. And you know it, and it's there for you to use at your beck and call. Another level of consciousness is you know that you don't know. So you have something going on, you don't know how to solve this issue. Okay, now those 2 might seem very, very obvious to everyone. Okay, but the next 2 are the more complicated levels of consciousness. The third one is that you don't know that you know. Like, there are things that we do and knowledge that we possess that we are not consciously aware that we possess. We kind of just do it. In some ways, it's beautiful because it's kind of instinctual knowledge, but at the same time, it doesn't provide you the same amount of power and flexibility as knowing that you know it. The 4th level, and this is the really, really dangerous one, is you don't know that you don't know. So there are things that you don't know, but you think you do. And caregiving has a way of identifying those things and pushing you to insanity until you realize that you don't know that you don't know. So if you can get from the don't know that you don't know to the know that you don't know, that is a huge step of progress in you figuring out what you need to know. those states of consciousness are important for you to be able to be aware of and catch yourself in, and make sure that you kind of know where you are. And if you don't, it can get difficult sometimes. Things can get pretty tough. So the third kind of subtopic here that I wanted to hit about mindset is accepting realities. There are realities of the situation that you are going to be dealing with as a caregiver, or that you already are dealing with as a caregiver. These realities are going to stretch and challenge you, and they're very likely to stretch and challenge you in ways that you had not thought that you could be challenged. Now that's the bad news. The good news is, as human beings, we very, very infrequently love and respect what we don't have to work for. When things are hard and you have to dig in and you have to work for them, you develop a love and an honor and a respect for those things at a level that you never could have if it was just given to you. And with the right mindset, that is what caregiving can provide to you. It is a beautiful journey, but it does require certain things for it to be able to feel that way. Along with that, you are going to have to educate yourself. Part of that mindset is that you understand what you don't know, and you go and seek to bridge the gap between where you are and where you need to be effective at being a caregiver. The nice thing is, you get a lot of lessons that you can be taught, and you get a lot of chances to fall down and get back up again and keep working. The next part of accepting realities is that you cannot plan on being the exception to the rule. So when you educate yourself, part of the education is understanding, what does this typically look like? What we're dealing with? Is it a disease where there is someone who is slowly losing their function, and the disease progresses over time? It might be something that inhibits someone's ability to develop. What does the development look like for most people in this situation? What does the regression look like for most people in this situation? The situation with my son, he was born and he had several years worth of very, very difficult progression as he started to grow and develop. With my grandfather, it was the exact opposite. It was trying to slow the regression process that he was experiencing as the dementia was working its way through its cycle. You have to know what those progressions look like and what's typical. And then you have to plan on not being the exception. You cannot make the plan to be the lottery winner, the 1 in a million. You can work like you plan on being the 1 in a million, but you can't plan on that from the beginning. You have to accept the reality of the situation, and most likely this is what we're going to look like. Finally, once you have kind of got a grasp for what that reality most likely is going to look like, you have to identify what is the end game that you want to get from this experience. If it's my grandfather, I want to slow that progression. I want to see how long can we delay the severity of the dementia. With my son, I want to see how well I can boost him from behind and help him to develop a new skill. And when I say end game, I guess I'm not talking about, the end of your life. I'm just talking about, put something out in front of you and set that goal, and, figure out what's a reasonable goal, and then let's focus our efforts until we can get there. All of these things that we've just discussed are all critical to the idea of the mindset. We want to really focus on growth. We want to be aware of our states of consciousness, and then we want to accept the realities of the situation that we're dealing with and try to work within those parameters. If we can do that, that is the foundation, I believe, to having the greatest impact as a caregiver and the most positive experience for you. So the next topic after mindset is your self-maintenance. You are going to be pushed. This is a difficult thing to do. We've already discussed that, but you've got to be ready for that journey. You got to be ready for a struggle. And what that means is that you have to be keeping yourself in a position of strength. So you've already got one person, maybe multiple people in some cases, that you are caring for. And then you have to be dealing from a position of strength in order to adequately affect that situation. You can't give water from an empty well. So you better figure out how to fill up your own well. With that being said, caregiving is stressful. We've already talked about that. And the first thing that you need to understand is that caregivers have a higher incidence of depression and anxiety-related disorders that crop up. Now, this does not mean that you are going to develop depression or anxiety from being a caregiver. It just means that with the stress that you're under, it's more likely to happen to you than someone else, or than it would have happened if you weren't dealing with this. Part of what helps with dealing with that stress is just maintaining that good mindset like we just talked about. Now, the next thing, just be aware that this can happen. I know it sounds weird, but it's different for everybody else. For me, I have dealt with depression. It doesn't mean that you hate your life. It doesn't mean you want to go commit suicide. It presents itself very differently. For me, it tends to be more energy-based. I tend to get tired. I fatigue very quickly. If I'm exercising, if the depression is really bad, I will be fatigued after 5 minutes as if I had been working out for 2 hours very intensely. It also tends to have kind of I get a mental fog where I'm just cognitively not as quick as I would have been otherwise. I also tend to get a little bit of an anxiety issue where if there's too many things going on, I tend to feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose and I'm like, man, there's too many things going on. I'm getting overstimulated here. I can't put my brain in 4 different places at once. I need to slow things down. And I think that's a little bit related to the cognitive part, but regardless, that's depression. That is something that you have to be aware that can happen. And it presents itself very differently, but educate yourself on depression, educate yourself on anxiety, and start to try to look for tools that can be helpful to manage that issue. It's no different than any other issue. You just have to be able to try to manage it. Sometimes, you may need help of a professional. Sometimes it may be something that you can just kind of manage on your own. How you manage it is going to be basically dependent upon you. And it's a smart idea to talk to your healthcare professionals, discuss the topic with them, and see if they have any hints. I did want to just briefly hit on a couple of tools that I have found useful, or that people around me have found very useful, and just to give you a couple of things to just consider. I'm not going to try and get into how to handle depression and anxiety in this video. That is an unbelievably deep hole to jump into. I'm not going to go down that rabbit's hole. But I do want to just kind of point out a couple of tools that I think are useful So the first one that I would like to mention is the Huberman podcast from Dr. Andrew Huberman, who is a Stanford neuroscientist. And if there is a podcast from God that has been sent to this earth to benefit humankind, it is this podcast. It is absolutely packed full of unbelievable information. And the nice thing is, despite being a brilliant neuroscientist, Dr. Huberman has a way of taking the focus of his podcast episodes and whittling them down into very, very simple functional tools that people can use to manipulate their brain chemistry or whatever it is that they're trying to do. I mean, it has everything from dealing with ADHD to depression, anxiety disorders, to how to build muscle better. He hits all sorts of topics and then whittles down the best science that is available into very, very functional tools. And almost all of them have like no cost associated to them. They're things that you can just do if you want to and you feel like it. And it makes it very, very accessible to anyone. The second one is a book called The Upward Spiral: Using Neuroscience to Reverse the Course of Depression, One Small Chance at a Time. That is a very, very long name of a book. It is written by Alex Kore, K-O-R-E, PhD. It is an unbelievably useful book that describes how your brain works. And if I can understand it, I'm pretty sure you can understand it too. So he also does a very good job of taking very complex subject matter and kind of whittling it down into common language and a common understanding that makes it very, very accessible for you to understand what makes my brain do this kind of stuff. The next three things I'm just going to mention, they're things that I have personally used that I have found very, very valuable, that when the stress starts to kind of ratchet up and things start to get very, very difficult, these are tools that you can employ very quickly to just try to kind of reset your brain and keep it from going into like a depressive spiral. The first one is a very, very short nap. And I mean like don't dare go longer than 20 minutes. Ideally 10 or 15 minutes. Try to lay down, set a timer. If you can get to sleep and get back up within 15 minutes, it just seems to kind of do a reset for me personally. This is something that I use. It's not always possible, but nonetheless, when it is possible, when I can do that, it does tend to be kind of a valuable reset button. But if I sleep too long, it's going to totally do the opposite, and it's going to make me feel very groggy and tired, and it's going to be harder to kind of bounce back into what I needed to deal with. The next one is play a strategy game. Find some sort of little game that you enjoy that requires strategy. Strategy makes the prefrontal cortex part of your brain start to work. That's the part right behind your forehead. That is like the very, very advanced human part of the brain that other animals don't seem to have like us. And when you kick that part of your brain into working, it turns some of the other ones off that are more likely to kind of create that depressive spiral. So for me personally, what I do is I have the board game Risk in an app on my phone. And if I start to feel like I'm not dealing with things as well as I should, that brain is starting to kind of spiral in the wrong direction, I'll stop. I'll go into a quiet place, and the strategy of that game makes a certain part of my brain engage in order to be able to play it, that it tends to kind of reset things inside, and then I get back into the battle when I'm done. The third thing that I like to use, And this is particularly useful when you are kind of noticing a lot of negative things that are going on. When your brain gets into a depressive spiral, people tend to notice more negative. Your brain's already hardwired to go negative, notice negative things before positive, as it is. You want to be more objective, and you want to be able to kind of bounce your brain back out and into a more objective place. So one of the things you can do is, I call it the observation game. And for example, you can drive to the store or something and look at how many green lights you hit versus red lights and keep track of them. Because when your brain is starting to kind of go into a depressive spiral, you will notice the red lights and forget the green lights. If you actually make yourself count them out, it will help to reset that, kind of recalibrate your brain a little bit to a point where you start to recognize, like, okay, life isn't nearly as nasty or bad or difficult as I think it is. I'm just kind of overwhelmed right now. So, and there's lots of different things you can do. You can walk down the street and go, how many smiles versus how many frowns do I see? But what you want to do is pick out something that can show you both sides of a spectrum, and you want to observe both of them and count them and really determine, what you are actually seeing. Really make yourself be objective. That's about where we're going to stop with depression and anxiety. Please look at those resources. The Huberman podcast, the Upward Spiral, these are fantastic resources. And there's TED Talks. There's a million different sources that have really good information on this particular topic that I could only dream of being able to try and compare to. So definitely use those resources. Talk to a therapist, talk to your doctor if you're feeling like something like that's going on. And if you don't, that's great. Congratulations, but be aware that it is a possibility. And if it is, it's not the end of the world. It's just something that you've got to deal with. And there are lots of tools out there that can be very, 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 very useful. So the next 4 parts of this self-maintenance section that we're talking about are going to be broken up into basically the 4 parts of yourself: your physical, your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual. You don't want to neglect any of these. You want to be dealing from a position of strength and balance. So first of all, let's hit the physical. Exercise is absolutely the greatest tool that I have ever found to dealing with some of the burdens that come through caregiving and making sure that I'm in a good place. What's really interesting to me is that my brain follows my body. So as my body gets stronger, as my body gets exercise and feels better and does what it needs to do, my brain likes to do the same thing. It's a lot easier for me to get my brain on track through my body than it is for me to get my body on track through my brain. So with that understanding, exercise is absolutely critical. You don't have to be a psycho. You gotta do what you gotta do. And different people have different abilities, but just make sure that you're moving. Do something physical. Get yourself, even if it's just, 20-minute walk once a day. Or, if you can do something more, great, do more. Do get something going physically. Make yourself move. Make yourself kind of breathe a little bit harder and push yourself as well as you can. Talk to your doctor, talk to whoever you need to make sure that you're ready to do this stuff, and then just do it on a regular basis. The second thing is sleep. Now this can be very, very fun depending on what you're dealing with as a caregiver. I have had 15 straight years of sleep deprivation. My son has never slept well. He's slept before. But he has had interrupted sleep every single month of his life. So I have never gone a month in the last 15 years without having multiple days in a row where my son wakes up between 2 and 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. And he doesn't go back to sleep. He doesn't take a nap. He never has. And I'm assuming that he never will, although I hope that can change. His sleep has just the nature of what he deals with. It has been very, very broken up. And I know that there's a lot of people who are caregiving that their sleep is affected. It is really, really difficult to function when your sleep is going to hell. So there's a few little tricks that you can use if sleep is a problem. If sleep is not a problem, if the only reason why you're not sleeping is because you just don't get to bed, then please, for the love of God, get to bed. Okay? Get yourself on a regular sleep pattern and make sure you're getting the amount of sleep that you need to take care of yourself. Now, if you are caregiving for someone who is interrupting your sleep, or there is something that is keeping you from sleeping that is outside of your realm of influence or your power to control, here's what we do. The first thing is, when you wake up first thing in the morning, get outside. Okay, as soon as there is light, get outside. 10 minutes, right as the sun is coming up, or if the sun is already up, just try to get outside and get some bright light exposure on your face, on your eyes, and even on your skin. If you can, wear like a short sleeve shirt. Even if it's cold outside, try to just get yourself exposed to it as much as possible. If you're living in negative 30 degrees and you can't go outside in a short sleeve shirt without dying, don't do that. But be reasonable, get outside, get that light exposure. Okay, it's gonna help set your circadian rhythm. It's gonna start setting a clock inside of your brain that is telling you when to be awake and when to sleep. The next thing is, if you have to get up, do not turn on the lights. Put in dimmer switches if you have to. If there are things that you have to do that you need light for, put in some dimmer switches in your house. Keep the light as low as you possibly can. Okay, or you could even use red lights. I regularly have to get up in the middle of the night with my son. I use a flashlight with a red piece of painter's tape, like masking tape that is red and it's over the top and it glows red. That's what I use for the light. And you know what's amazing is if you minimize your exposure to light when you get up, it makes it way, way easier to get back to sleep. Not only for you, but for the person that you are caring for. I have actually gotten to the point where I have minimized the light exposure that my son experiences when he wakes up, and I have gotten him to start going back to sleep. It is like a flippin' miracle in my life after 15 years of interrupted sleep to be able to get him to go back to sleep after he wakes up. I cannot tell you how meaningful it was. Thank you, Dr. Huberman. You are a saint. Get the light in your eyes first thing when you wake up. If you have to get up in the middle of the night, if you have to deal with something, minimize the light exposure. Use a red light. Do something that minimizes. Basically what we're looking for is like white or blue light out of the equation as much as possible. Now, the next thing that I have found is that if you are lacking sleep, start dimming the lights in your environment as you get ready to bed. It starts a chemical process in your body that prepares you for sleep. You want to mimic the sunset that you would experience if you were a caveman. Use those dimmer switches, start turning them down. And one of the things that I've noticed is that firelight or candlelight, like if you turn on the fireplace or you use some candles, those seem to have absolutely zero effect on my sleep. They light up a room enough to be able to kind of see and move around without killing myself, but it also doesn't trigger like the same response in my brain that there's sunlight out and it's daytime and it's not time to sleep. So get those lights progressively lower in 2 hours or so before you go to sleep. When you hit the pillow, you will hit the pillow with like a chemical sleep momentum. And the quality of the sleep that you get Even if it's 4 hours of sleep, that's all you can get. It will be better than 8 hours of sleep or 6 hours of sleep when you just had the bright lights on, walked into the bedroom and shut them off and go, okay, sleep, body. That's not very conducive to having good quality sleep. Okay, doing the bright lights straight to bed just doesn't allow your body to do the biological things that it needs to do in order to be able to prepare for that restful state. And if you can build up some momentum in an hour or two prior to going to bed, you will get so much better quality of sleep than if you just kept everything bright and then just try to make yourself sleep like that. And if you're one of those lucky people that just all you need to do is just get yourself to bed on time, then freaking get to bed on time. The rest of us are out here dying to live your life. So if nothing else for us, please get some sleep. So the last thing is diet. It is really, really easy when things get stressful and you're trying to keep all those balls juggled up in the air to eyeball that McDonald's sign over on the side of the road. It's very convenient. It's super easy, but you've got to be aware what that's going to do to your energy level, to how you feel. You really do need to maintain a healthy diet. Be cognizant of what you put in your body and what that allows your body to produce. I'm not going to get into this too much, but maybe I think here in the future, we're going to do a couple videos on diet preparation and things like that, because my son has an unbelievable complicated diet, and it is a serious burden to be able to manage that. I've developed a few tips and tools to just make that management easier, but it's also become useful for me in being able to manage what I eat and make sure that I'm not just going wherever the wind blows me for convenience sake with what I eat. So that's our physical side. So exercise, get some sleep, and make sure you're eating that healthy diet. I know nobody's ever heard that before, but it really does matter. The second part is the mental side. Your mind matters. You're going to be pushed a lot in difficult situations as a caregiver. There's no way around it. It's just difficult. That's okay, but there is a biological reaction that happens when people deal with difficult situations or in particular things that feel like failure. So, which happens in caregiving. It happens a lot in caregiving. You're pushing and pushing and trying to get this good outcome, and it doesn't work out because you're going uphill. I was a baseball player years ago in another life, and being a caregiver is so similar to being a hitter in baseball because you fail so often. If you fail 7 out of 10 times as a hitter in baseball, you are like all world God level baseball player. Okay, that is what the greatest baseball players do. They fail 7 out of 10 times. That 3 out of 10 success is monumental. You've just got to be able to work through failure. But what happens is sometimes we get our failures kind of piled up, and it actually can create like a biological, just a failure mechanism in our brain. And you want to make sure that you push other aspects of your life, challenge yourself in other ways to be able to have successes outside of that caregiving. So even something simple like playing Sudoku, or my little game that I just described about playing Risk. Okay, have something like that where you can engage in this thing, challenge your brain a little bit. Maybe it's learning a new hobby. Maybe it's just challenging yourself to be a little bit more creative with something that you like doing, but find something that pushes your brain a little bit and do it over and over again, and make sure that it's something that you can have a level of success with, because those successes in your brain will offset a lot of the failure that you experience as a caregiver. And hopefully you don't experience that much as a caregiver. Some of us do. Some of us are bludgeoned with failure on a regular basis. And, despite our best efforts, we come up short. So just be aware of that opportunity to kind of challenge your brain and build in successes. And that will do a lot to just kind of keeping yourself in the strongest possible position. The third part is this emotional health that it's very critical. Your emotions are probably going to get pushed. Your buttons are going to get pushed. It's going to bring out, and I don't say this in just a negative way. I say this in a way that is like your emotions will get pushed to both sides of the spectrum. Okay, unbelievably positive and unbelievably negative. Just the nature of challenges itself kind of creates this roller coaster ride when you're caregiving. And that is part of what creates that wonderful depth of love and respect that you get, is kind of seeing the opposite side of the spectrum and the depth of that going the other way. It can be challenging, and it's really, really good to have someone to talk to, whether that's a therapist or a friend, or if you're a religious person, talk to your priest or your pastor or something. Those, just make sure that you have someone that you can talk frankly with, be open with, and that someone that can provide some emotional support back to you, so that you don't feel like you're all alone, and you don't feel like there's nobody there to back you up. This is just me talking. I have nothing to back this up, but this is my own personal experience talking. I would suggest that you not make this person that you are kind of using as your emotional support. Don't make it somebody who's doing the caregiving with you. There are times where things get really difficult. And if the person that you are always so frank with and always able to kind of emotionally unburden yourself with is also doing it with you, there's a possibility, and a very distinct possibility, that they are going to feel when you unburden yourself as if you are burdening them, and they have to pick up and do more than what they are already doing, and they may be already taxed. So it's a lot better to have like an emotional support person who is not in the foxhole with you, because otherwise you're just dumping all your crap on that person who's got to pick it up and deal with it as well, and now they're caregiving for the person and you, and that can just create a very, very difficult situation. So just keep that in mind. The emotional side is, it's going to be dealt with one way or another. You might as well deal with it the best way. And, therapy nowadays is great. They have online therapists now. Like the burden that it was to go have a therapist is like so much removed from what it used to be. There's a million therapists out there, and there's a lot of really good ones. The last part is of this kind of 4-part of your person is the spiritual side. Now, this is kind of a tricky wicket because people have very, very different ideas as to what spirituality is. Some people tend to feel much more like structured and religious. Other people feel very, very kind of almost ethereal, and they believe in like kind of a consciousness, and some people don't believe in anything about it. But what I think it really comes down to is values. Spirituality is understanding what your values are, and then holding yourself accountable to live those values. I think that's a kind of a commonality in all of those different aspects. Regardless, there is a part of you that wants to understand what you value what you believe, and then to live accordingly. And that benefits a person. And caregiving will push that aspect. It will push your spiritual side. And if you don't know what it is, or you're neglecting it, or want to ignore it or whatever, it's going to come up, and it will force you to reckon with yourself. But if you will take time periodically, and I'm not saying every day, I'm not saying every week, but a couple times a year, just kind of sit down and let yourself take an accounting. Am I living in accordance with what I really believe? And that, first of all, it allows you to recognize what you're doing well. Second of all, it allows you to correct what you can do better. And so be patient. Nobody is perfect. We all have some corrections. And when you identify a correction that needs to be made, we're maintaining that growth mindset. So it's an opportunity. It's a wonderful opportunity to just get a little bit better and do something a little bit more like what you really would do it. Like the real you. Just be you. And that, I think, is a really critical aspect of maintaining that strong self that has the well full enough to be able to take care of yourself and take care of others. All right, so the next part of our video is balance. We're maintaining that mindset, we're maintaining ourselves, and now we need to make sure that we're staying balanced. Balance starts out with just be reasonable and be flexible. You are not going to have the luxury of being a perfectionist. So if that is something that you struggle with, you are going to have to kind of tone that down. You're gonna have to work on that personal issue and be better about it, because chaos, it comes in this job, okay? There's no way around it. When you're dealing with caregiving, the chaos is gonna hit. You don't have to sit there and be terrified of what's around the next corner, but you do have to be aware in the back of your mind that chaos can come, and it can show up on your back porch on any random Tuesday afternoon and potentially just take a dump in your backyard, okay? And it's not the nicest way to think about it, but it's gonna come. It can happen. And what you don't want is for that chaos to hit, that unexpected thing to happen, and for it to crush you so that you crumble and wallow around and don't jump back up and get back and re-engage and start doing the problem solving. That's what can really kill you. That's the part that really hurts, is when you're not ready and you get hit and it knocks you completely off your feet. Okay, getting hit is gonna happen. It's gonna happen all the time. Okay, but if you can stay on your feet when you get hit, it's a totally different game. And part of that is just being aware that the chaos can come. So the next part of this is developing a functional habit routine. So this is being reasonable. Being reasonable, being flexible is understanding that you function in large part based upon habit. And if your habits are destructive, if they are not helpful in your cause or what you're trying to do, it can create some headaches. And so we want to create positive, functional, forward-moving habits. One of the greatest resources I've ever found with just understanding habits and how to rewire them and manage them better is a book called The Power of Habit by a guy named Charles Duhigg. I may be pronouncing his name wrong, and I apologize, Charles, if I've messed up your name, but it is a fantastic book. It is absolutely, especially when you mix it with the book we mentioned previously, The Upward Spiral. You get those two things together and you can gain this fantastic understanding of how your brain works and how you can kind of, I don't like the word hack, but the way you can set yourself up with the ability to kind of take an existing habit that may not be so functional and manipulate it and work it into a more functional habit that is going to be getting you more on point, more in the right direction of where you want to go and serving its purpose better. The third thing here is we're going to seek moderate consistency over high performance. Okay, we are pickup trucks, not Ferraris. It is way, 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 way better to have a structure where you can exercise moderately for 20 minutes every day in a very, very manageable way than it is to try and go out and kill it with your exercise for 2.5 hours, and then you won't be able to do it again for another 2 weeks. We want to be the people who are putting a little bit of money away at every paycheck. We are not playing the lotto, hoping for a good retirement. Okay, we are looking for very, very consistent, habit-focused structure in your life that allows you to perform at a reasonable and functional level. We are not trying to take over the world. What we're trying to do is see how functional we can get. And if you can create a structure where you are doing all of these functional things every day or every week or however you need to line them out and be consistent about it, that is the win. Okay? It's not about going out and doing the most impressive thing. It's about doing the necessary thing over and over and over again. And it's that mindset that is going to keep you on track and keep you functional as you're going through this roller coaster ride of caregiving. Now, this kind of comes back to the last point that I wanted to make on this being reasonable topic. And I call it the 80-20 rule, and it's not the 80-20 rule that some people use where they're like, 20% of the world works and the other 80 are pieces of garbage and won't do anything. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you set a goal. Sometimes our goals are a little bit optimistic. And when we're caregiving, we're trying to affect things that we don't always have 100% control over. It is okay to set a goal and get most of the way there. And when you control everything that you can control, it is still a success to get 80% of the way to the finish line. I want to try and illustrate this in a way. This is that kind of ties into this moderate consistency. We all want to have 6-pack abs. Not all of us have a lifestyle that's capable of providing the flexibility to do the things that are required to have 6-pack abs. Okay, so getting up and doing some zone 2 cardio for 30 minutes every day, that's a win. You're doing it every day. You're not going out lighting the world on fire. That's 80%. You're not one of the 99%ers. 80% is pretty darn good. And it's going to get you steps in front of where you were otherwise. So and another example of this is my son's 15 years old. He's never said a word. He's never been able to speak at all. I would absolutely die to be able to have my son speak. And I don't know that he's not going to be able to speak, but as of this point, we have taught him sign language. It's a little bit difficult for him because he doesn't have great physical control of his digits. But he also has a speech device, which it's basically like a program that's built into an iPad that allows him to navigate through several layers of buttons and things to be able to formulate some verbal communication. So he can create a sentence, I would like to have some pie, or something like that. And he can navigate through this little speech device on an iPad really, really well. And it does provide him a great deal of outlet to communicate that he may not have had otherwise. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that that's speaking. And it's not like being able to sit there and just have him tell me exactly what's on his mind. But it's about 80% of the way there. And it functions and it works. And you know what? At this point, it's a win. And it's okay to feel good about that win. So the next section of the video is going to be focused on problem solving. Now, I have developed a method that I like to use. It's adapted from a behavioral therapy model that I was taught by my son's behavioral therapist, that model was intended to help people get to the root of problematic behavior, but it actually works really, really well to just get to the bottom of any kind of difficulty that you're dealing with, to figure out what the root cause of it is, and then figure out what you have to do to interject. Ironically, what I have found is that most of the time we know what the solution is. We just don't know where the root cause is. So we end up kind of chasing solutions to things that aren't really the root cause, and they don't have the ultimate effect that we want. So the first step in this little problem-solving matrix is you want to log whatever burdens or issues that you're dealing with. Anything that's sucking up your time and effort, or just maybe even your mental stamina, you want to be logging this, and you want to prioritize that log. You want to be able to sit down from time to time and go, okay, what is the thing that is really the biggest, most significant burden here? And then you want to figure out what happens before that. This is an ABC model. It is antecedent, burden, consequence. Okay, so the antecedent is what is happening just prior to whatever this particular issue is that you're dealing with. Is there something that's occurring that's setting it up? Is there something that is kind of feeding that problem in some way? And you want to take that and identify it. Then you're going to look at, like, how bad are the consequences? So this is all going to kind of feed into your ability to kind of rank these issues, but we're going to try and see what feeds it, what's the issue, and then what's the outcome that's so problematic, and then rank those and decide which ones are the most critical. Once you get that list created, you can identify a problem to solve. Now, you don't have to start with the biggest problem either. So sometimes the biggest problem that you have is something that is going to be really, really difficult and taxing to address. So pick a smaller one. That's fine. Pick a less important problem. Something that's sucking up maybe a smaller amount of time, but the more that you can address those smaller ones, the more time you have to give to the big ones. And it's kind of like, I've heard people use like a debt snowball to try and get rid of their debts. So they start paying off the smaller debts that are going out each month, and every month they have more money to pay towards a larger one. And the big ones are the ones that you hit at the end. That totally works. That is a very, very functional way to assess these issues and burdens that you're dealing with. Once you kind of have that log, you've picked one that you're going to try and deal with. What you want to do is look at that antecedent. Try to see what is preceding this issue, what's a cause, and do you have a way to affect that? And I'm a big believer in infrastructure. Lots of times you can build something or create a functional format around someone or something that allows for it to be less burdensome. A perfect example of this is, like, my son kept breaking doors, like 8 doors on his bedroom, busted, and I was finally done. And I was like, okay, I am going to build a door. My first thought was I'm going to buy a solid core door and put it on my son's bedroom. And then I tried to price it out and I was like, holy crap, that was ridiculous. So what we ended up doing was I just learned how to build a door. I built 3 doors before I could build one that was solid enough that he couldn't break it. And I kept improving each time, but now that door is up and he can't bust through it. He can't do any damage to it, and it's just one less thing that I have to worry about. It's one less potential problem for me to deal with. That was an infrastructure thing that I put in. The doors that we had, the hollow core doors, were not built for him, so I gave him a door that was built for him. So that's what I mean by infrastructure. Look at infrastructure, look at something. Is there a way to adapt the environment? Is there a way to adapt tools to make this issue or whatever you're dealing with go away permanently? Then you're gonna have to stop and you're gonna have to look at your own strengths and weaknesses. What are the strengths of the weaknesses of the environment? What are the strengths of the weaknesses of the people that are caring for this person? What is the individual's strengths and weaknesses? You have to assess all of these things in order to be able to really wrap your brain around what can be done. So once you've accounted for what you're going to work on, you know the causes, the antecedents that are coming before that, and you feel like you've got a good understanding as to kind of what's driving whatever's going wrong. You want to identify something that you can do, and the way I like to say this is one sure step forward. So you want to come up with a solution that has a very high chance of a positive impact on that issue, and then a very, very low chance of failure. You don't want to go try like a risky solution and then slip and fall, with that 2 steps forward, 3 steps back kind of scenario. Once you've identified that, you engage. Now the chances are you may have some difficulty in figuring out what the solution is. It may not work the way you wanted it. With that door that I built, I had to build that door 3 times because I didn't know how to build a door. But I identified that as a sure step forward. It was an infrastructure build, so it was going to be like a permanent solution once it was actually done. And so you engage, you work on whatever solution it is, and once you're done and you've made that solid step forward and it's not the kind of thing that's going to slip back out from underneath of you, you go back to your list and you re-engage. Over time, just like a debt snowball, you can build momentum. You become more effective. The little nagging things that are dragging out your day start to disappear. The last thing I'm gonna mention in this video is once you get through the problem solving and you're setting up good habits and kind of maintaining yourself well, and you've got this ball rolling forward and things are starting to slowly improve, you need to take some time and refocus on your values. You don't have to do this all the time, but you do need to do it periodically and really come back to, why am I doing this? Your consciousness about why you are doing what you're doing is important. And it matters both in the sense of keeping you motivated, but also in making sure that you don't miss the precious little gems that are going to come across your path. Being a caregiver is absolutely gut-wrenchingly hard at times, but it is also one of the most beautiful parts of existing that you could possibly ever imagine. Understanding where you are, understanding why you're doing what you're doing, and reassessing what you believe and why you believe it makes it easier to identify those precious little moments, those precious gems. Just being able to kind of reassure yourself that you're doing the right stuff, you're doing the best you can, it's valuable, it's meaningful, and in the end, you're never gonna regret it. Thank you. We'd love, if you found this valuable, we'd love to have you guys hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. We have a website, Adapted Builds, that goes through some more information. We try to provide resources on there, and by all means, if there's something in addition to what we've provided here that you feel like is valuable, please put it in the comment section. This is by no means some sort of all-inclusive list of things that people can do. So share, please. For the love of God, share. If there's something that you know, this community needs it. People that are going through this stuff, you never know who's going through something similar. Share what you know. That's the whole purpose of this YouTube channel. It's the whole purpose of our website. It's the whole purpose of our little nonprofit. So, yeah, fight the good fight. And we'll see you guys in the next video.